Have you ever been haunted by the mystery of Halloween's eerie origins? A night of costumes, candy and creepiness, October the 31st casts its shadow across our entire planet. But what ancient rituals and dark traditions gave birth to the celebration we know today? 2,000 years ago, the ancient Celts resided in what is today known as Ireland, the United Kingdom, and northern France. They observed Samhain, a significant event positioned halfway between the fall equinox and the winter solstice. During this period, family hearth fires were allowed to extinguish while the gathering of the harvest took precedence. Once the harvest was secured, the Celts and Druid priests would ignite enormous bonfires, partaking in prayer and celebrations. This was a time filled with mystique, for the Celts held the belief that the veil separating the physical realm and the spiritual world grew perilously thin during Samhain. The anticipation of ancestral spirits and otherworldly beings crossing into the physical world was rife. To avoid being abducted by fairies, Celts would dress up as animals and mythical monsters, masking their human identity amidst the dance of spirits around them. In the 7th century, the Catholic Church designated November the 1st as All Saints' Day to honour every saint in the church. As the 9th century dawned, Christianity permeated Celtic territories, intertwining with and gradually overshadowing ancient Celtic customs. By 1000 AD, November the 2nd was declared All Souls' Day, a day dedicated to paying homage to the departed souls. It's broadly considered that the establishment of these days was the Church's endeavour to supplant the Celtic Death Festival with ecclesiastical approved observances. All Saints' Day was alternatively known as All Hallows or All Hallow Mass, originating from Middle English All Hallow Mess. Consequently, the eve prior, which coincided with the Celtic Samhain, garnered the name All Hallows' Eve, a term that morphed over time into the modern day Halloween. As generations passed, a fusion of All Saints' Day, All Souls' Day and Samhain gave rise to the contemporary Halloween festival. Today, the Catholic Church continues to observe All Saints and All Souls' Days. Simultaneously, certain Wiccans and Celtic Reconstructionists keep the spirit of Samhain alive, marking a convergence of historic, religious and cultural narratives. During the commemorations of All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day in England and Ireland, poor people would call upon the houses of wealthy families. In return for pastries termed soul cakes, the visitors pledged prayers for the departed loved ones of the household. This custom became known as souling and was later adopted by children who would venture from one doorstep to the next, asking for gifts such as food, money and ale, an early form of the trick-or-treating we know today. In the 1800s, the tradition of etching faces into vegetables became synonymous with Halloween in Ireland and Scotland. The inception of jack-o'-lanterns is rooted in an Irish legend about a man named Stingy Jack. He deceived the devil and, as a consequence, was condemned to wander the earth using merely a glowing coal housed in a turnip as his lantern. Inspired by this tale, individuals started crafting their own lanterns. They carved menacing faces into turnips or potatoes and positioned them in windows or by doorways, aiming to ward off Stingy Jack and any malevolent spirits that might be roaming nearby. In the early chapters of America's history, Halloween celebrations were extremely limited, particularly in the largely Protestant colonies, with the exception of areas like Catholic-heavy Maryland and a few southern colonies. It was not until the influx of new settlers in the mid-19th century, notably the Irish escaping the devastating potato famine, that Halloween began to weave its way into the national fabric. These newcomers brought with them the customs and traditions of their native lands. Notably, the act of pulling pranks during Halloween was a prominent tradition. In the late 1800s, mischievous acts such as relocating farmers' wagons and livestock to barn roofs, upending vegetable gardens and toppling outhouses were commonplace. By the early 20th century, the playful and mischievous nature of these pranks escalated. Acts of vandalism, assaults and occasional violence began to taint the playful spirit of the Halloween celebrations. The concept of haunted or scary public attractions had its origins in Europe. The famed Marie Tussauds Wax Museum in London, for instance, showcased a chamber of horrors since the 1800s, displaying ghastly figures of those beheaded during the French Revolution. In 1915, the establishment of an early haunted house attraction by a British amusement ride manufacturer marked another instance, immersing visitors in an ambience of dim lighting, shaking floors, and spine-chilling screams. Across the Atlantic in the US, the Great Depression era saw a surge in the popularity of such spooky attractions. The economic hardship of the times intensified the mischief and violence that accompanied Halloween celebrations. Alarmed for their children's safety, on All Hallows Eve, parents organised haunted houses and trails in an attempt to keep their children off the streets. Costumes and disguises have been integral to Halloween since its inception. However, it was not until the mid-20th century that these disguises began to look like the iconic styles that we are familiar with today. As communities started to focus on organised events like haunted houses to ensure children's safety and entertainment during Halloween, the nature and style of costumes underwent a significant transformation. The spooky and abstract attire gave way to characters that resonated with children, drawing inspiration from popular radio shows, comics, and films of the era. By the 1950s, the advent of mass production made costumes widely accessible and affordable. Box costumes, readily available to the masses, opened a world where children could easily embody characters ranging from princesses and mummies to iconic figures like Batman and Frankenstein's monster. Halloween attire had evolved, reflecting a broader cultural shift and the influence of media on the popular imagination. Modern-day Halloween is characterised by a portrayal of ghosts that are far more menacing and superstitions that are increasingly eerie. We steer clear of black cats, a superstition rooted in the Middle Ages when it was believed witches transformed into these creatures to evade capture. We also avoid walking under ladders, a fear tracing back to ancient Egyptians' reverence for triangles. But amidst these common beliefs there lie forgotten Halloween traditions, many of which were less about spooks and more about foreseeing the future. Centuries-old customs, especially in 18th century Ireland and Scotland, were often centred around young women discovering their future husbands. Irish cooks might hide a ring in mashed potatoes on Halloween, with the finder destined for true love. Scottish women threw hazelnuts named after suitors into the fire. The one burning to ash, rather than popping, was seen as representing the future spouse. Women also engaged in rituals like throwing apple peels over their shoulders to discern their future husband's initials, or gazing into mirrors in candlelit rooms to catch a glimpse of their future partners. All of these traditions, whether evoking fear or foretelling futures, hinged upon the unseen spirits, a sentiment echoing the ancient Celts' belief in the poignant presence of otherworldly entities during Samhain. And there you have it, Halloween from its inception as the mystic festival of Samhain to the spirited, globally embraced celebration we know today. Each step of the way, history has imbued it with rich traditions and stories, a fusion of ancient rituals and modern traditions. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey today, and if you've made it this far, I am truly appreciative of your time. If you'd like to join us on more historical voyages, please consider subscribing. It does really help the channel out. And last but not least, happy Halloween. Until next time, stay curious.